Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today gained over 45 years of experience practicing entertainment and media law. He received his BA from the University of Rhode Island, his Juris Doctor from the Franklin Pierce Law Center, and a Master's of Law in Trade Regulation from New York University School of Law. Now he is the author of multiple award-winning books, both fiction and nonfiction. The Shakespeare Killer is his 7th novel. He currently lives in North Carolina with his wife of 49 years, Carol Ann. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Douglas J. Wood.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Doug, I can tell the answer to this question from your resume, but our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Yeah, as I jokingly say, I had a day job that I had to worry about for quite a while, 3 children, a mortgage, college educations, just the run-of-the-mill kinds of things that you do as you build a career and go, through your earlier years and learning and everything. But I always had this passion to write, and so I would dabble now and again, but it never went anywhere. And then later in my career, I was asked to do a trade book on the area that I practiced law in. So I did that, and it did okay. And I sort of said, well, gee, if I could do the trade book, I can do a novel. So in the 90s, I wrote a short manuscript of the first novel I wrote called Presidential Intentions. It's a series on the first woman president of the United States. And I sent it to the publisher, my trade book publisher, and they wrote back saying, stick to trade books. So it completely deflated me in the 90s. I said, this is terrible. Well, forget it then. I just dropped it. I said, I guess that's just not going to be in my thing. And then when Hillary Clinton looked like she was going to actually run for president of the United States, I rekindled the idea, got serious about it, and this was in the 2000s. And then started, and I wrote the first one, and it did well. And then I wrote 2 more in the series, and went on to do other books. But it was really just the reason it took so long is that I just had a career, and my first career was the one that paid all the bills. This one was not going to pay all the bills back then, so it just was a natural evolution of what you do.
Well, you've become quite prolific because your latest novel, The Shakespeare Killer, is number 7 for you, and it's a sequel. And we're told to write series of at least 3 before we begin to earn out as an author. So you're definitely on the right track.
I'm working on the 3rd in that series right now, as a matter of fact.
Well, you practiced entertainment and media law, so you probably have a stockpile of ideas for your fiction that may be stranger than fiction.
Little do you know.
Is there any one exciting tidbit that you experienced in the field that you can share? Changing the names, of course, to protect the innocent.
I'll give you one that was sort of my introduction to being in entertainment and media law. A very famous rock star, who, if I said his name, everybody would know who he is. But I don't want you to speculate, so I'm not going to say his name. Anyway, so he would come into our offices when we would have meetings with him. and he'd sit across the table from you, and he'd take out a little canister, and he'd put the cocaine on the mirror in front of you on the desk, and take out his straw that he had, and he'd snort cocaine, and you would say to him, you know, name, that's illegal. Please don't do that. And he would look at you and say, you're my effing lawyer. I can do whatever I effing want in my effing lawyer's offices. And so then he would go back to do that. We had another very famous rock band, Southern rock band. But anyway, you were not allowed to be alone with them in a room as a lawyer. You always had a second lawyer with you because they hated lawyers and they would get violent and throw stuff at you if you were alone. So I woke up I used to I had to go to clubs late at night and everything else. And when that was the music area of when I did a lot of music law. And one morning I woke up and I looked over at my wife and I said, you know what? I've been getting in really, really late. I can't keep doing this. So I said to her, I go, Carol Ann, either I got to get out of this business or I'm going to become an alcoholic or a drug addict or both. And I just sent my resume out and I got interviewed for a job in more traditional entertainment and media and took that job. And that was the rest was history. But it was the entertainment industry has characters in it that are quite colorful, to put it mildly.
Yes.
So I picked up on some of those personalities over the years, and I incorporate some music, in the books as well, lyrics and try to intertwine that in and stuff like that. So it's got a little bit of legacy for me in my writing. But yeah, it was I did that for almost 50 years, and it was one crazy character after another. They're incredible people.
Larger than life personalities.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I remember one time when I used to be the industry's chief negotiator across the table from SAG and AFTRA and negotiating the actors' contracts, the union agreement. And I made a proposal or something. I forget exactly what the proposal was. And we took a little break. I'm in the hallway, and one actor comes up to me and says, in the old days, if you made a proposal like that, we just take you out back and break your knees. And I looked at him and I said, okay, tell me, I just have a few questions for you. Number one, are you acting right now? Because if you are, you're very good. If you're not acting right now, then I have to call the police. So there's like so many stories of these characters that it's really entertaining. It's a lot of fun.
Well, your next series should be that. I think that would be a great series.
Then I'd probably get my knees broken, so I'm not so sure I want to do that.
Well, once you wrote your first manuscript, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
The very first one, the first two I self-published through an Amazon deal. And then it got picked up by a small publisher for the third one. And then for my fourth book, I went with, and was discovered, if you will, by Claire and her company, Plum Bay, and they've been my publisher since. So they're an independent publisher.
Did writing that first book or the first couple of books change your process of writing?
Not really. I mean, because I'm a lawyer, a lot of what my sort of DNA is research. That's what lawyers do. We're trained to do that. So I do a great deal of research all the time. And then one of the challenges I had in the first book that I didn't realize until I started writing it was to sort of keep track of characters, which can sometimes, come in and out of your mind. So I did little miniature biographies of each one. And they wouldn't necessarily all get in the book, but it kept me focused on who the characters were. So that process of research and mini bios has been my system, ever since I started. So it keeps me focused. And so it's a lot of research and then, just sort of keeping the storyline and the characters within their character so I don't veer off and, shock somebody, go, why did that person do that? Or whatever it is.
That really helps. I have a big whiteboard and lots of sticky notes, to try to keep me on track because, in the first of the book, I'll have a protagonist who has green eyes. And by the end of the book, she has brown eyes.
And if there's anybody who'll catch that, it's your readers.
Exactly right.
They really will. And it's interesting because when I self-published, obviously Amazon had some editors and whatever, but they weren't all that great. And as I got, more professionals working with me, I came to see just how important editors really are, and how you have to develop a very thick skin when you're dealing with editors. Because they catch stuff and you want to hit yourself in the head for going, I didn't see that. How did I not see that inconsistency? How did I not realize that? That's the value of editors and pre-readers and everybody that I always use.
Definitely everyone should use professional editors because, like you said, they really make a difference. They help us tighten up the
Yep.
storylines. They help us kill our darlings and all those passages that aren't, propelling the story forward.
I remember one editor saying to me one time when I was one of my I wrote a book called Dark Data, which is a thriller about using social media as a weapon of mass destruction. So anyway, I was getting into a detailed explanation of something, and the editor says, "Take that out. If they really want to know, they can find it on the internet." I went, okay, because it just dragged down. It's like I used to it's like the love-hate relationship many people have with Tom Clancy's books. His books, after you read In Hunt of Red October, you could build a summary. It was so detailed. I love that stuff, but apparently a lot of editors and readers don't. So there you go.
Yes, I had an editor one time that said, if you're running toward a burning house, you don't want to stop and describe what the house looks like.
That's very good. That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. And I would have sat there. I said, I would have gone into some detail about what the burning house looks
like. The shaker siding and the,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the editor would say, listen, it's just a burning house, stupid.
Exactly. There's more important things than the color of the shutters.
Exactly.
Well, we writers like to write. We don't always like to do publicity and promote ourselves. Have you found anything? What are you doing to promote your books?
I do a series of blogs. I'm a blogger that spins off the topics of my books. The last two books that I wrote are about a serial killer and a FBI profiler who hunts down serial killers. So the main character is the FBI profiler. So I'm now in support of the books. I do a twice a month blog that has something to do with criminal investigations, hunting serial killers, technology that relates to it, and the like. And also I blog occasionally on some of the other books, topics that are germane to the other books I've written about, China's moon race and social media being a weapon and whatever, the various thrillers that I've written over the years. So I do a lot of blogging in that way. I have a website, obviously, that's there. I'll do the occasional book signing, which is always a trip because, I've gone to book signings where there'd be 100 people show up and another book signing where one person showed up. So, it's kind of it's a humbling thing to do, book signings. But I'll do book signings, and then I just just the usual stuff. With Claire, the publisher, comes up with their various kinds of promotions that they do. That's great, go do them and that kind of stuff. But it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's hard because there's so much out there. And breaking through the clutter with, one of the biggest ways, obviously, is word of mouth. If I can get somebody to start talking about it and stuff like that, you can do that as that's affordable, obviously. But if you want to, the writers like me, I'm not making $1 million writing books. I'm not going to pay for the kinds of campaigns that Random House and Penguin and the big houses can do. I just can't do it. So you have to depend upon doing a good volume of smaller things. You just keep plugging out there with Facebook and Instagram and Twitter or X and the other things you can do. We all do the same.
Well, even the big 5 publishers require their authors now to do all their own legwork and most of their publicity. So I think we're all in the same boat.
Well, there you go. Next time I see John Grisham, I'll tell him
that. Yes, indeed. Well, you're now in the South, although North Carolina may consider themselves more Eastern, but there are lots of great writers there and great artists there, craftsmen. And so that that helps. Is there any specific book or seminar or writing retreat or groups that you found that have improved your writing journey?
I really, I did a little bit with a mystery writers group a couple of years ago. That was good. But here in North Carolina, there really isn't, I haven't identified any real groups. I have some book clubs I join, obviously, just to hear what people have to say about other books and stuff like that. And that's pretty simple. But in terms of an organized, focus groups and things like that that specialize in writers getting together, I've not found any here in North Carolina. I'm sure there might be, but I haven't found them.
Yeah. Just about every state has, a writers group. And I do love a writer's retreat where you can go and take a class in the morning and then write furiously all afternoon, get back together for dinner, and meet your fellow writers. And that's so great not to have to fix supper or walk the dogs. And it's such a dedicated time to writing.
Well, the truth is I haven't done that yet, largely because my past job, was a gazillion hours a week to keep track of the crazy clients. So maybe I'll do that now that I'm sort of semi-retired.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the passage you brought to share today and then read from your book so we can hear your tone and voice?
No, great. Thank you. The latest book is The Shakespeare Killer. And as I said earlier, it's the second in a series that follows an FBI profiler named Christopher DiMeglio. And he's an FBI profiler and he's trying to find the serial killers. The first book was Blood on the Bayou. It took place in New Orleans and the United States. The second book, The Shakespeare Killer, is in the United States and in other parts of the world where he's trying to track down this mysterious killer. And this killer communicates with DiMeglio through texts, short messages, SMS. So it's possible for him to really even locate where this killer is. So early on, after they discover that what this killer is doing is killing lawyers, and doesn't understand why. So they have a text conversation that's in the book. And that's the passage that I thought I'd read, is the very first time that DiMeglio actually encounters the serial killer via text. And this happens, in the book. So I'll just read the passage. So it starts out with and you have to sort of get the sense of this, which is one of the challenges actually in writing a book, is it's dialogue, but it's not dialogue that if you're in your mind, you have to realize it's not dialogue of you and me talking and looking at each other. I'm looking at a cell phone and I'm going back and forth on the cell phone with a mysterious person behind the phone who I can't see, I can't hear a voice, I can't see a face, I just see words. So for a profiler, trying to profile somebody, that's a lot harder to do than it is with the normal thing. So this is his first conversation with the serial killer. And this is after they discover that they're killing lawyers. And the DiMeglio starts out after the serial killer says a few things. Why should I believe you? Everyone in the world knows we're looking for someone who kills lawyers. The bubbles repeatedly appeared and disappeared. The texture was thinking. Why don't you just call me? It's a lot easier, typed DiMeglio. The response came quickly. Come now, Agent DiMeglio. Please don't take me for such a fool. Let's just keep our conversation on Signal. No doubt you know why, DiMeglio did. And all he could do was play along. It was the caller's game. Okay, so who is the next lawyer you are going to see commit suicide? Not so fast, Agent DiMeglio. If this was the killer, DiMeglio needed to build a relationship with him. Unless DiMeglio built some trust, the killer would never open up and provide clues, make mistakes, or confess or ask for help. But something told DiMeglio that this killer didn't want help and had no remorse, at least not yet. Sorry, tell me about yourself, and please call me Chris. Start simple. No bubbles. And what should I call you, DiMeglio typed, hoping the texter had not ended the conversation. Bubbles. Please don't play with me, Agent DeMeglio. I've read your FBI manual on profiling. I hope you found it interesting. I wrote much of it. Yes, I assumed that. To be honest, I found it simplistic, too obvious. A superiority complex, noted DeMeglio, another trait of a serial killer. DeMeglio texted Lenore Peters, his executive assistant. Lenore, please call Georgia and Brad and Carla to join me in the office in a half hour. I may have the killer on the phone. Lenore Stevens was unlike most EAs. She was not a 9-to-5er who constantly monitored her phone and emailed 7 days a week. DeMeglio could always depend upon her. He sent the next text, wanting to be sure to keep the conversation going. I'm not trying to play you, typed DeMeglio. I just don't know what to call you. Bubbles. If you need to call me something, you can call me Dick. Okay, Dick. Why do you want to be called Dick? Are you a fan of Shakespeare, Agent DeMeglio? DeMeglio was very familiar with the works of Shakespeare. The nuns in his parochial school, particularly Sister Agnes, aka Sister Agony, made students read most of the Shakespeare's works, hammering one interpretation after another into their adolescent brains. The students were convinced it was her way of punishing them, and DeMeglio's knuckles still ached in cold weather as the aftermath of the frequent slaps of Sister Agnes's ruler across his hands when he misbehaved, and he misbehaved a lot. I am familiar with Shakespeare, Dick. Why? It was Shakespeare who wrote in Henry VI, the first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. DeMeglio smiled and shook his head, responding, okay, I'm familiar with that scene, but I understand your name. You're quoting from the character, Dick the Butcher, right? Very good, Agent DeMeglio. You got that right. And that's what you want to be called. It works for me. Wanting to keep the conversation going, he typed, Dick the Butcher wanted to get rid of the only people who could stop him from committing the crimes he planned. What Shakespeare was saying is if you kill all the lawyers, chaos will ensue. Only the lawyers kept it at bay. Bubbles. Dick wrote back, exactly. Like I said, Dick got it right. So you want chaos? No, I want dead lawyers. Why? That's enough for today, Agent DeMeglio. We'll talk again soon. And so then this conversation throughout the book goes back and forth and ultimately comes to, an ending. But it's all about, and Shakespeare is intertwined throughout the whole book. So there's references to Shakespeare in both directly and then characters that are sort of Shakespearean. And so if you're, and I'm a big Shakespeare fan, so if you're familiar with Shakespeare and you read the book, you'll see little hints and little things I stuck in there for the fun of having the Shakespearean kind of things throughout the book.
That's a great passage. So the serial killer has to be quite literary if he knows Shakespeare.
Yeah, and that's right. And it's I got to be careful what I say. A publisher will shoot me if I give too much away.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the killer is very, very well read, and gets into some really interesting discussions with DeMeglio about justice from Aristotle to all the Plato and whatever. That's all in the book too. So I don't want readers to think you got to be some kind of a egghead to read it. You don't. But it does allow for some really interesting discussions about criminal justice and how it works. My books are, the first thing I want, obviously, is that someone to have an enjoyable read, preferably on the beach in a nice sunny day, having a pina colada or something while they're enjoying the book. But second, I like to leave my readers with something to think about. So when I get into the serial killing and the technology and justice and how it all works, having lived it for a while, when I was practicing law, there's that messaging in there as well. So there's I want to leave them with something more than just a fun story. I want to leave them with something to think about. So, so that's kind of how that all intertwines in this book with all the classics who wrote about justice, and Shakespeare was one of them who did.
Yeah, I love the highbrow tone of that, and to think of a person who's so well read being a vigilante, social, wanting justice. That's great.
Yeah, well, the funny thing, not so funny thing, actually, the fascinating thing is when I started the research and decided to do a series on serial killers and the FBI profiler. I was fascinated by the intelligence of serial killers and the IQs and just, it's almost like they're so smart and so conniving and so, inherently evil that they've got the intellect to do it in a way that just, masks any kinds of remorse or any kinds of responsibility. A lot of the serial killers you read about, are the ones who get the headlines that are just like completely whack jobs. Others are far more calculating and far more fascinating, and it's a terrible way to put it. But in terms of, trying to understand the psychology of serial killers, it's really fascinating to get into their minds. In my research, I didn't get to talk to a serial killer, but I did talk to FBI profilers and other folks who are psychologists and stuff about all of that, which I love that part of the writing process. So I've learned in some ways a lot more about serial killers than I want to know, including the FBI statistic that at any given time, there are probably hundreds of serial killers walking around the streets. So then that's independent research the FBI has done. That's the scary part.
It's been very frightening. And don't they say that there's a thin line between genius and madness?
And there you go. You just defined a serial killer.
Do you Google yourself or read your reviews? And if so, how do you deal with the bad or the good ones?
Yeah, I do Google, I look for the reviews, and I've been lucky enough to have mostly good ones, but every once in a while there's a bad one. And the one I remember I read one when I looked at it, I go, this person must hate me for some reason, because I don't even think they read the book the way their review said. So you don't, you got this is a thick skin thing. If you're a writer, I mean, you're going to get criticism. You're not going to get all 5 stars. There's going to be some people who are not going to like it. And the ones that trouble me the most are the ones who will rate it, with a 1-star, 2-star, whatever they want to rate it for, and then not leave a comment. I'd rather see what they had to say, because then I can say, okay, that's an interesting point they make or whatever, and try to learn from it. But it just drives me nuts when I see, 1 or a 2-star and there's nothing said. It's like, what was that person thinking? So
yeah, and it's crazy stuff. 1 star because they didn't like the dedication in the book.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
Yeah, and it's and you go out and you when you're a writer, you go out and you ask your friends to read your book and leave a review, and it's all part of the game, and so you kind of recognize those names and very, very happy with those. But the ones that I get the most, satisfaction out of when I get a review from somebody I have no idea who they are, and they've written a nice review about the books. So those are the ones that make your day. You really feel good about that. And then, occasionally when you win awards and stuff like that, that's always a nice feeling to get. So it's any author would be a liar if they told you they don't want their ego fed and to, sort of be told they're a good writer or whatever going forward. And they'd be lying if they told you that it doesn't hurt when someone, as an entertainment lawyer, I mean, I used to always get a kick out of clients and others who would say, the thrill was getting nominated for an Academy Award. I didn't have to win. That's BS. They desperately want to win every one of those awards, and they desperately want it. And the ones who say, I never read my reviews or I never go to my movies, trust me, they're lying. And they don't, that's not true at all.
That's just human nature.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I love when someone will reach out and say that my book touched them. That's been my favorite part. And going to book clubs, whether you Zoom around the world or whether you walk into somebody's living room, that's been great, because book clubs will dissect your book and find something that you think, how did they ever come up with that? I never dreamed that would be taken that way.
This is North Carolina has a good number of retirement communities here, large retirement communities. So I've done book clubs at some of the senior citizen area. And the very, very vibrant senior citizens. It's not a home. I mean, these are communities, And I remember I did one over at a place called Porter's Neck here in North Carolina, outside of Wilmington. And there were about 10 women in the book club. I could not believe how they had read the book so thoroughly, had discussed it before I got there, and had a line of questions that were just fabulous. And I mean, I felt, I'm going, this is great. And so it was, those kinds of events are worth their weight in gold. They really are, because that's when you get the kind of live feedback you want to have, and then you can ask them questions like, did you see this, or did I make my point there, or did I deliver or not? And they give you some honest, really helpful answers. So I what I've done since like the last 3 books here that I've written in North Carolina, I've used some of the book clubs as pre-readers and given them the manuscript, and they're happy to do it. They'd love to do it, and they get, they want to see the credit they get in the acknowledgments, which is great. They deserve it. But they're invaluable. The pre-readers in the book clubs, I agree with you, are they're terrific to learn as a writer.
So true. And that's why we're writing, to reach those people and to leave our legacy on the world. And that's what we want to do. Is these books will long outlive us. We think, we've got to do in the first 6 months to make this book, popular out there. But, I'm discovering books. I just read one from 1925. So they're going to be around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the real, not so often talked about reasons we do what we do, is that we want to leave a legacy for my grandchildren. Like someday they'll be in their 50s and they'll pick up some book I wrote long before and say, hey, that was what grandpa was about, kind of thing. That's one of the biggest motivators you have, is to leave a legacy, which is so terribly important.
That's exactly what happened when one of my granddaughters chose my book to read as a book report in high school. And
wow.
she looked at me and said, not everybody's grandmother writes books. So that thrilled me, of course.
There you go. That's right. Yeah, my grandchildren are a little too young to read my books right now, but if their parents let them read them, I'd shoot them. But but you still, when every once in a while, I'll be there and they'll out of nowhere, my 8-year-old granddaughter will say, Grandpa, are you writing another book? So she's aware of it, and the rush you get from just the question, that, that kind of thing, it's worth its weight in gold.
And you could do an exercise with her and sit down and let her start writing her own book. And
that's exactly what I've done.
That'll be great.
Why don't you start writing down, write ideas and, that kind of stuff. So hopefully I'll be able to teach her a little bit of that too.
I interview so many people, and that's the way they started writing, was journaling, especially for memoir, taking those journals and turning them into a book. And if they don't want to publish for the world to see, they can leave them for their families.
Exactly. No, you're right. You're right.
Well, Doug, this has been a great visit with you today, all the way from North Carolina. And as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite a unique group. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
That's a great question. And, I think it's for we older writers, that we're at a stage of our lives where we, really have an opportunity to follow a passion. And it's probably very often for us, it's a passion that you thought about, that you didn't have time to do. There were other things that took you away from it, or whatever it was, but it's in your mind. It's planted in your head. And getting over that first step of following that passion and trying to write your first piece, your first book, your first memoir, your first whatever it's going to be, is such an exhilarating moment. The first time I held in my hands my first book, it gave me a greater rush than any great case I handled or result I got when I was dealing with billions of dollar deals. It was just so personal. It was me. I was on those pages. So what I'd say to writers over 50 is, don't lose that opportunity to put your passion in writing and see yourself and leave something, as we talked a little earlier about, your legacy. That to me is the best piece of advice. Do it. I mean, and you've done it. You've had these conversations with so many. I'm sure that people say, "Gee, I had an idea for a book. I wish I," and you say to them, "Do it. Start with an outline. So just start that first process." And so many people don't do that. And my advice is, don't be someone who didn't do it. Go out and do it, and don't worry about whether it's really good. If it's good for you, if you like it, and you get a rush out of writing it, and you get a satisfaction, then you've accomplished everything you need to accomplish. Don't think you can become a Pulitzer Prize winner or a bestseller or on the top of the New York Times list or anything like that. Don't go in for that, because that's probably 99% of the time not going to happen. But what you are going to get is a wonderful feeling of creating something, as you said earlier, long outlast you, and will be sitting in the Library of Congress ever. So that's pretty heady stuff.
I agree. And I think now's the time. That's why I call it writing in life's sweetest third. So we're so thrilled that you were here with us today. And I'm looking forward to that series about those crazy musicians you had in your past. I think that's next for you. But now we're excited to call you one of our authors over 50.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.